Well, I was born on July the 20th, 1940, to a mother, uh, Marjorie Grace Billings Bain, and my father was Ivan Earl Bain, IRL, and he hated that middle name. So when he was about, I think 16 or 17 years old, there was an old cowboy named Cal. And so he took the Ivan Earl out. That would be I Bain. Okay, he took that middle one out and put a C in there. So his initials were Ivan Cal Bain, I.C. Bain. Okay. Um, Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about their heritage, where they were from. Okay. Um, she was born in 1913, my mother was, and in Del Rio. And my dad was born on February the 9th, 1907. Okay. So I my mother's background and her heritage is quite interesting because it leads us back to the Alamo. Her grandfather, let's see, would it be? My great great grandfather was Andrew Kent, and because of that, he died in the Alamo on March the 6th, 1836. That's quite a long time ago, bud. At any rate, I've got a story that I want all you kids, to have an opportunity to read sometime.
Hold that off
on
to your
the
right hand side. There
okay,
you go.
like here.
Yep, perfect.
All right, and it's the Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers. So along in the Alamo, there was Andrew Kent, along with Travis. That'd be William Travis, was the colonel that oversaw all of the soldiers in the Alamo. And then Jim Bowie was another great Texas hero that died in the Alamo as well. And David Crockett also died in the Alamo. So all of those guys, now there were 182 guys that fought in the Alamo, and of those 182, those famous guys I just mentioned, there were how many? They were sieged in the Alamo itself for 12 days, and on the 6th of March in 1836, at 5:30 in the morning, the Mexicans with 6 to 7,000 soldiers marched on the Alamo. And 1 hour later, at 6:30, the whole battle was done. But there were 182 Texicans in there fighting, and they killed over around 600 Mexicans out of the whole thing. So that was almost 3 individuals for every Texican that was fighting. Okay.
Wow.
But it was all over in 1 hour. And in the very end, at the end of the big fighting and everything, there were 7 of them that were still left alive with David Crockett. He was one of them, but they run out of shells. They couldn't reload and everything. But Santa Anna, who was head of the Mexican army, had made up for sure. He has made up his mind that all of the men in the Alamo would die. So they just murdered the other 7 guys, along with David Crockett.
That's awful.
It's terrible, but he was angry about it, and I want you guys to all have a chance to read that someday, kids.
Read that book, okay?
Yeah, you bet. because it'll tell you a lot about your history.
Yeah. So
All right.
you grew up in Del Rio, Texas.
Yes, I did.
Which is pretty close. That's like border.
Oh, it's a border town. It's only 2 miles from at that time, Villa Cunha, when I was born, okay?
Okay.
It was the village of Acuna in Coahuila, Mexico, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about growing up over there.
Well, it was a little town, really, about Del Rio was, about 20,000 people, okay? Most of them were ranch families, okay? The town was the wool and mohair center of the world at the time I was born.
What's that?
They had sheep.
Oh.
They produced wool, and mohair, goats, Angora goats produced mohair. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So but right now, today, there's some place out in Australia that's the sheep and goat center of the world today. But at that time, my little town, they had a lot of sheep and goats. Okay.
Okay. And so what years did you live there from and to?
Yeah, I was born in 1940, and I lived and went to college from there till 1965.
Wow,
Okay.
So for 25 years, you lived in Del Rio, Texas.
Roughly, yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what kind of things what was life like there at that time?
Oh, it was a small town. Give you an idea. To go to school in the morning, I'd jump on my bike and my dog would come running behind me. His name was Corky. He'd run behind me to school, and then he'd end up sitting around there under the bikes until school was out, and I went back on my bike, and he'd come barking, running behind me. And we didn't have to have leashes on dogs or anything. It was just a open town, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a neat town. Didn't ever have to worry about anything happening in town.
That's cool. Did you have any like security issues with the border, or did people just walk across it, or what was the?
Not at that time. It wasn't a big deal. Fact of the matter is, as I grew up, you could go over to Mexico anytime you wanted to.
Like it was just the next city over.
Yeah. Of course, you had to cross over the border, and you had to go through inspection and stuff like that when you went over and came back.
Yeah.
But food was real inexpensive over there. You could eat a good supper for around $1.50, $2, and over here sometimes it was 3 times that much. You know?
Absolutely. That's cool. That's cool.
It was fun.
So did you grow up in like a home or on a ranch or on a property?
Well, I said I grew up there from when I was born till 25, but the real truth of the matter is my dad owned was a manager of a 5 and 10 cent store. So in my earlier years, even though I was born in Del Rio, we lived in San Antonio, right next to my grandmother, on Mason Street in San Antonio. 407 Mason Street.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was right there, only about a mile and a half from Fort Sam Houston. And Fort Sam Houston was a big hub of activities during World War II. And so in 1940 and 41, I was from Del Rio, but I lived there right there in the hub where all the soldiers came to get started at Fort Sam Houston. Okay.
Wow.
Fact of the matter is, my dad was called in. He was going to be drafted. Okay. And along with all the other men, they had them stripped down so they were naked, and all of them were in line going through these, getting shots and stuff like that, prepared to go Most of them went and fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Okay, but
And what was that particularly?
that was in World War II. Okay,
Where was it?
Um, on the Mediterranean, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Um, I'm not real sure, but my history is not real good as far as that's concerned.
So he didn't get drafted.
But what it really boiled down to, they were told to go put their clothes on then and go back home and then come prepared to leave. And so they all went back prepared to leave, and they told them, says, okay, we'll call your name, and when we call your name, I'd like for you to leave and go out this door, and you'll be heading out to go through everything you need to in order to go fight. And if we call your name and point to the other door, you go back and go back home. You won't be coming. So Dad said he listened to all these guys, name after name after name, and when they got to him, they said, Ivan Bain, you leave. He later on found out through somebody that lived in one of his apartments there in San Antonio. She worked in one of the offices there at Fort Sam Houston. They said they found a scar on your lung. So apparently my dad said he had pneumonia when he was a little boy, and they thought he had tuberculosis, so they didn't take him. So, and most of the guys that ended up go over to Battle of the Bulge died from San Antonio because they didn't have good training. They just sent them straight over to fight. Okay? So that's sad.
Wow.
But that's what happened anyway.
That's crazy.
Another thing I wanted to mention a little earlier, which I thought was kind of funny, when I was born, Dad was in a manager in Galveston, Texas, a manager of a Kresge. But my mother wanted me born in Del Rio, so she went several weeks ahead of time to Del Rio. And my dad wasn't even there when I was born, but my mom's best friends, one of them was William and Husey Myers, and they were very close to me all during my life. Husey Myers was like a second father to me. But at any rate, Husey was driving around drinking scotch in his car. And he'd come running in to ask Will in. Now, is the baby born yet? Nope. So, nope, not yet. So then he'd go out and drive around, drink a little more scotch. And so he'd come in a little bit later on. Is the baby born yet? Nope. Finally, the baby was born. Is the baby born yet? Yep. What'd they call him? Barry Kent Bain. And he stopped. Bearcat, what a hell of a name for a kid.
That's fabulous.
So that I've joked about with my friends for years and years. Bearcat, what a hell of a name for a kid. My God. But those were some earlier years there, Bud. But in Del Rio, as growing up, there's a few things I'll mention. I was known as the kid in Del Rio that knew where all the caves were, but the caves that I went to were hunting arrowheads, okay? And one day, some guys from the university came in town. They saw a kid walking down the street, and they said, who would know where the caves are? Well, they were looking for spelunking caves to go down into the ground with headlights on, you know.
Yeah.
They used to carry canaries with them, and the canary died. They got out of the cave because there would be gases down there. So that's the only way they'd know whether there was any poisonous gases down there was that canary. The canary dies, let's get out.
Wow.
Yeah. But at any rate, this kid said, Barry Bain knows where all the caves in our area is. So I was, at that time, I was about 10, 12. Well, I was probably 14, 15 years old.
And so what, of these caves, what was the nativity behind?
Well, they wanted me because they wanted to go down into those caves and find the water down there and get blind salamanders, because one of them was doing a doctorate on blind salamanders. And so I knew, just like that kid said, I knew where a lot of Indian caves were, but I knew where a lot of spelunking caves were too. So we went into a lot of spelunking caves. One of them we went into, and the university team, we didn't go anywhere near the bottom of the cave. So they later on came back to the ranch and were down there for 2 or 3 days. And Husey Myers and his wife Willin were worried. They went to the Del Rio Fire Department, sent them out to there to get them out. But they were still doing all right. It was just a long time. They went several miles in that cave.
It was that big.
During that time, yeah. And apparently they'd done a lot of other research down there than the water, you know.
Since,
yeah.
In the years since.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But they really got worried about the bunch that went down that spelunking cave, yeah.
I bet. How did you get to understand where all these caves were in the first place?
Oh, Bud. First of all, I had a large Indian arrowhead collection. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one would lead me to another cave, and then somebody else would share where another one was. And there was a huge Indian cave on Husey Myers Ranch. Okay. And Husey had at one time, Husey owned, what was it, 100,000 acres in Mexico, which turns out to be about 150 square miles of ranch land in Mexico.
Wow.
But in the 1930s, there was some kind of a illness for sheep, okay? And they had to kill all of their sheep. And Husey, at that time, he found out that in Mexico, once you lived through your life, you died, the ranch land went back to Mexico. And he didn't want that, so he sold his million acres, okay? He sold it to several other relatives, and he came back over here and bought 40 sections of ranch land. Now, that 40 sections of ranch land in Texas was 36 miles out on the Highway 277, north of Del Rio. And it was my playground. I was kind of like a Tom Sawyer of Southwest Texas, okay? And I did everything you can imagine. I collected lizards. I collected and caught snakes, okay? And so I was interested in all of them. Fact of the matter is, I know a lot about snakes. I never really enjoyed them much. I will say one time, Bud, I saw an Indian cave with Clem Bote and I. We had gone down the river in a canoe from Devil's River, from the headwaters, and went about 40 or 50 miles downriver to some bluffs where there were some Indian caves up there. I could see some black soot on top of the cave, which meant that the Indians had lived there from the soot collected from the fire that was burning in their cave. And so out in front there was a lot of broken talus, little square rocks from rocks that they'd carried up to put around their campfires, and swelling and condensing. Those rocks would swell, and back after a while they'd break apart. They'd take more rocks up there, and the rocks then probably went down 400 feet from way up there. So the Indians had lived in that cave hundreds and hundreds of years, okay?
Okay.
So I decided, Clem, we got to go up and check that out. So we steered our canoe on the side of the river, and we jumped up on those rocks, and we'd walk up 2 or 3 steps and fall back one. So it took 2 steps up and 1 back, okay? So we got right there in front of the big cave. Now, this is probably the scariest situation I've ever been in, okay? And I was not aware that it was going to happen.
Okay. That's a statement.
So we were walking up this, there was a big rock, and we decided to go up that rock to get into the cave rather than walk around on more of this rock, the loose rocks. So I went right up this rock. Clem was right behind me. We had a seine that we were going to seine through the dirt in the cave, and that's how we found Arrowhead, see. But I went up this rock, and I put my hands on top of the rock like this, pulled my head up, and when I got my head up right even to the top of the rock, there was a rattlesnake's head about as big around as my fist, and he had those triangular eyes, and his black tongue was out up almost to my nose. And then I looked back on his body about this big around. He must have swallowed a rabbit or something. He was as big around, bigger than a fire hose, okay?
Oh, man.
And then, on top of that, there was another one over here the same size, and another one back and back, same size. And I didn't take a second to realize I was in bad trouble, because, friend, had that snake bit me on the nose, it'd have been all over. It was a huge rattlesnake. I'd never seen one that big before.
Wow. That's wild.
So I backed off that rock right now, and I turned around to Clem. I'm still getting ghost
I was thinking
bumps.
about it.
Yeah, or just thinking about it, Joe. But at any rate, Clem and I got back. We didn't think about that cave one more time about going up for any more out.
Wow.
Arrowheads. It was over. Went back to our canoe and continued on our trip. But that's one thing I wanted to be sure to share with you guys, because it was something else that scared the squat out of me. Okay. Is Grandma back there?
I think we're going to probably grab a bite to eat now.
Are we? Is it time to eat?
I'm going to hit the pause button on this one. We're going to pick this up in a little bit.
Okay.
We'll be right back, folks.